skipping the intro tonight because we're running behind, and I'm on a schedule, so we might even not even get to the full hour tonight. So anyway, Mr. Gibbs, I guess, had an issue he had to deal with, so it was out of
Yeah,
his control.
definitely unexpected.
So anyhow, today we are going over Article 1, Section 1, sort of, and then we're gonna. I stumbled upon an article in the NPR network called talking about a potential lawyer shortage creating or a lawyer shortage creating a potential constitutional crisis. Now, y'all don't know Doug. So I shared that with him in terms of the story that we're going to talk about because I think that it's that just to me that's just I think a lawyer shortage is actually probably one of the greatest potential possibilities for the growth of this country ever. But that's just me.
He says we're having a constitutional crisis because there's a lawyer shortage, and I started laughing, and I accused him of throwing a joke at me. I mean, I can't. I don't even know how to. Well, let me put it this way: when people ask me about my expertise regarding the United States Constitution, and they say, "Oh, well, then you must be a lawyer," and my first response is, "No, that's why I understand the Constitution."
Right.
So, so saying there's a lawyer shortage and that might cause a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, so and here, allow me to share the screen. I'm not. Let's just get this out of the way now because we're
Yeah,
talking
because you're
about it.
serious, and that's
I'm not.
what's even that's. I don't even know how.
Yeah, yeah, right here. This is not a joke. Lawyer
I
shortage.
want that link because I gotta write about this.
I sent it to you. I emailed it to you.
Okay, that's right. That's right. You said you sent it to me. I just haven't had a chance to see it yet.
So you guys don't. Why don't Why don't you? I'll let you have the floor, sir. Because I'll let you have some fun with this.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's fun with this. All right, let me do something here because I ran in the door and now I actually have all these tabs up. So let me get rid of them because it might help with some of my delay here.
If you have anybody in the house occupying bandwidth, that's your delay.
Yeah, that's probably the problem too, but I haven't had a chance to kick them out yet. All right, so I've been trying. I have a short story shorter. I have a boomerang kid. So you know what I mean by boomerang kid. They leave, they come back. They leave, they come back. Uh, so the chat, I pulled up on my other computer. I pulled up the chat on Rumble, and it, it says lawyer shortage, and the people rejoiced.
Yeah.
I wish we had a lawyer shortage. So here's the thing about lawyers, and let me say this with respect to the few lawyers that are worth a darn that are in my life, and I do appreciate them. Uh, for the most part, and the lawyers that are reasonable lawyers will agree with me on this. In law school, you don't learn the U.S. Constitution. In law school, you learn case law. In other words, what the judicial opinion is regarding the Constitution. And when I talk about that, one of our biggest problems in this country is the fact that that lawyers are taught two things. Number one, to interpret the law and twist the law best they can for for the benefit of their clients. Number one. Number two, when it comes to judges and lawyers and people in that industry, and our politicians, the understanding is that they are there to interpret the law or interpret the Constitution. And real quick, I usually don't go through this until Article 3, but this deserves definitely the attention here. Boy, good get on stories. Holy cow. Way I like to explain it so that people understand. My wife was born in Mexico. Her first language is Spanish. My first language and only language is English. My wife is bilingual. My father-in-law is bilingual. All of my sister-in-laws are bilingual, but my mother-in-law, not so much. She speaks Spanish. She does not speak English. She's been in this country for dang near 60 years, and she never learned English. And so that explains why I have a decent relationship with my mother-in-law. So if I do want to communicate with her, I need an interpreter. I speak English, she speaks Spanish. So my wife comes in and I tell my wife in English what I want her to tell her mother. She tells her mother in Spanish. Her mother responds in Spanish, and my wife tells me English what her mother said. And I believe her, even though the look on my mother-in-law's face might not match what I'm told she just said. Who has the power in that conversation? The interpreter. The reason why I like to use that, so I really can hammer home this idea that the moment that the political class and the judicial class establish themselves as the interpreters of the law and the interpreters of the Constitution, they took all the power. Because that means only they know what it really says, and it must be in some foreign language. So when I pull out my pocket Constitution, I say, well, wait a second, sir, right here in article whatever it says. They say, oh, no. You're not a lawyer. You don't understand what it really means. Only we can interpret it. And then they interpret it to mean something that completely boggles the mind because it's not even close to what it says. But who are we to argue? They're the legal class. They're the judicial ones. So they interpret it. We're just, dumb citizens. That is their way of controlling the law and telling you what your liberties really are, regardless of what you think otherwise. And here's the thing, and I remember Ron and I have had this conversation before, and he really took this to heart when I first said it to him way back in classes. When this document was written, it was written in a language that the people could understand. Mm-hmm. The average person understood the Constitution. It didn't need to be interpreted. It was written in plain language. The only reason why we have difficulty today is because they have, number one,
bastardized language.
Yeah, they bastardized the language, number one. And number two, you're convinced it's legalese. And then you read it, and that's what you see is legalese. So you're like, oh, well, too complicated, too boring. I'll let the lawyers worry about it. And I'll let the judges worry about it. Mm-hmm. And so now, getting back to this headline that...
Oh, you want to go back there?
Yeah, let me see it again. Put it up on the screen again. Because I like to just, real quick. Lawyer shortage creates potential constitutional crisis.
I mean, check this out. This is not a short article. Well, I guess it is short.
Well, it's not a couple paragraphs. I mean, that's like saying, a shortage of farmers is going to cause a dental crisis. I mean, the two really, be honest with you, hardly relate to each other. Yeah, it is interesting. Scroll up just a little bit again. As once again, this is the first time I know about this because I've been at class all day. I hadn't have a chance to look at my email.
There's a guaranteed right to counsel for criminal defendants in the United States, but counties and cities are having a tough time hiring public defenders.
Let's stop there. There's a guaranteed right to counsel. Government has already taught you that your rights are guaranteed to you and the government must provide them. That's not the Constitution. That's not what rights are about. Government's not there to guarantee your rights. Your rights were given to you by God. They belong to you. Their job is to get out of the way so that you can access your rights. Yes, you do have a right to counsel, and they're not supposed to create any obstacles to your ability to access counsel. But we have been told, no, they're there to guarantee your right to counsel and guarantee your right to education. So they're going to pay for your education and guarantee your right to healthcare. So they're going to pay for your healthcare. Well, if that was the case, if it was really guaranteed rights, the guarantee would apply to all your rights, correct? So where's your guaranteed gun? So it's obviously not a proper definition because it doesn't apply to all your rights. You don't have a guaranteed right. I mean, the very first 4 words, and then they foul it up. Now, where they get guaranteed right is from the Sixth Amendment. Sixth Amendment, 6th or 5th Amendment. I'm 90% sure it's the 6th, but you have Sixth Amendment. And that's where your Miranda rights come from, is your 5th and 6th Amendments and all of that jazz. But your rights are not something they give to you. It's not something they guarantee. It's not something they protect. It's something they're supposed to get out of the way of. They're supposed to secure your rights. That's what it says in the preamble. Remember, we talked about that last week. Secure the blessings of liberty. And it talks about securing your rights in the Declaration of Independence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Right after it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have a right to be happy. You have a right to pursue happiness.
Rights of accused in criminal prosecutions. I think this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's one. And right there at the very end of it, and it says to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So it is a right, but the way our rights are designed.
But again, is this a right at the federal level? Is this a right at the federal level?
Then that's at the federal, but actually that is in all of the state constitutions too. So, but it's your right regardless. It's your right, whether it's whether it's on paper or not. You do have a right to have counsel if you've been accused, because you have rights of due process, and a part of due process is having representation if you so desire it. And that's the other key, if you so desire it.
Who is this Miranda chick?
Yeah. The Miranda rights come from a 1969 trial as somebody versus Miranda, or Miranda versus somebody. I can't remember all the details, but basically after that trial, the person basically was told that because they hadn't been told what their rights were. It's an interesting legal game. We have a judicial legal web that is so complex. This is what's funny about getting back to your interpretation of the law, because constitutional law to the establishment is this idea of what judicial opinion is, and what this web of case law is. And so therefore that's constitutional law, not what the Constitution says. And so when I talk about constitutional law or knowing the Constitution, someone says, oh, so you know all these cases about this and that. Well, I know a lot of them, but it's not because I'm a lawyer. It's not because that's constitutional law. True constitutional law is the Constitution. But the thing is, that web is so vast that no matter who you are, if you look hard enough, you'll find case law somewhere to support your position. It's that vast. Mm-hmm. The best researchers win the cases. Well, those are the ones that are best able to manipulate the system. But that's not constitutional law purely. Tracy, sarcasm is my first language. That's pretty good. But anyway, good get. I'm going to have some fun with that later when I get a chance to write. Now, and part of the reason why I ran a little late is because I've got some surprises regarding. Let me back up. On July 4th, real quick, just 2 minutes. July 4th, I have been requested to be in Washington, D.C. at the Jefferson Memorial to be a reader of the Declaration of Independence at a ceremony. It's put on by a group called Spirit of Liberty Foundation. I think it's the name of the organization. And then after those of us that have been chosen to read the Declaration are done, then there'll be a bell rung before each name is read of the signers. And what they did last year at Mount Rushmore is they had children reading the names. This year it's at the Jefferson Memorial. And I'm very, very humbled by the fact that I get to be a part of this ceremony. That's the good news. The bad news is they ain't paying for it. And so my online constitution, and my online classes, my in-person constitution classes have been holding kind of like a fundraiser thing. Well, my Beaumont class decided to send out a letter to all the other classes saying, hey, we want to get, well, here, I'll show you the letter. So on one side, it has help send Mr. Constitution to Washington. Then on the back side, it's a letter to the different classes. The letter basically says, hey, Doug has been our friend and our teacher, and, we want to get him there, without, him having to put it all on a credit card or something. So, that's kind of what's going on. So delayed by spending time with people on that and a few other things. And so I will be in Washington, D.C. on Independence Day, which I think is a Tuesday,
It
actually.
is a Tuesday. Yeah, we will not be having class on that
Anyway,
day.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna be out of town anyway. I'm gonna be doing an event. Well, it's not really an event. It's a breakfast with a bunch of people who love what I do in Chattanooga on the 3rd, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Then I'll be in Washington, D.C. on the 4th, and then on the way back, I'm gonna hit Arkansas, which my parents moved to Arkansas a couple years ago. I haven't seen my mom in 2 years, and they're in Arkansas, so I'm hit them on the way back. And then next week, tomorrow, I'm actually heading to the Oregon coast, but I'll be back next Monday, so it won't affect this show here. I'll be back
Well,
by
and
Tuesday.
actually, what I'm going to have you do, if you're going to be around when you're coming to do the Belmont class on this Thursday,
I'm up in Oregon. That's what I'm saying. I'm leaving
this
tomorrow to go
Thursday.
to Oregon. Yes.
Okay, so then tonight when I get back, we need to get together because I need something from you. So, but we'll talk about it after class.
We'll figure it out. Okay. I'm actually speaking in San Diego tomorrow. I've got a big event down in San Diego, Solana Beach. So pretty jazzed about that big event that I'm speaking at.
Well,
I've got
actually,
some.
you know what? I'll tell you here, and then and because this is probably going to impact some of the audience as well. So, we talked about it last night on the glitch. Um, there are several of us. Well, specifically, Doctor Z and I and myself. We are spearheading. What we want to do is we want to do a 12-hour marathon celebration show of uh, of like content creators and patriots who are in the movement. Nothing personal, but just a celebration of the United States independence, what liberty means to them, why they're in the fight, and that sort of thing. And so, one of the things that we're going to ask to people to do is to um, we're going to reach out to content creators and ask for like 10 to 15-minute interviews, on of a personal nature about what liberty and the country means to them. And we're also going to ask anybody who wishes to submit videos, like a short video, 2 to 3, 4 minutes, about what liberty means to them and why they're in this. Just if you're a random person, we want to put a bunch of those together. We're looking at about 7 hours of content that we're trying to kind of splice together, that we're going to add on the for the 3rd of July. So we're going to have that 12-hour class or that 12-hour marathon be
On July 3rd.
on July 3rd, the Monday before the 4th.
All
So
right. I should be in my hotel in time. I could probably participate if you want me
no,
to.
no, I'm going to have you record it first. I'm going to have you record it ahead of time. So
Okay.
if you're not
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. That makes sense, actually.
right, I'm going to have you record it ahead of time so that
That way
it's
I'm
just
not doing it from
it's
a hotel room.
right. Yeah.
All
So
right. Very good. All right. Yeah, we can do
yeah,
that. No
yeah.
problem. Yeah. And someone says I'm a mover and a shaker in the chat. I appreciate that. You don't even know. You don't even know. And I do appreciate that. One of the things I'm very excited about is I'm going to be the primary sponsor for a pastor's breakfast in October with a lot of pastors. And so there's a lot of things I'm up to. So let's
Doug, before we get there, guys, I need to, David will not be joining us tonight. That was a mistake on my part. Um, I had him scheduled for next week inadvertently, but that wasn't his fault. We discussed the 20th, but my fat fingers, when I scheduled it on my phone, chose the wrong Tuesday. So because I go by my calendar, I had it for the 27th, not the 20th, even though we agreed to the 20th. So I own that mistake. He and I have already discussed,
So
and
you're in touch with David.
yeah, he's actually going to come on and do a
Yeah.
show. We're gonna do a show on Friday morning.
He and
So
I
for
used to
90
be on
minutes.
each other's shows way back in 2007, 2008, 2009. We've known each other a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And our good friend, mutual friend Stephanie's been trying to connect us.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that is interesting. I would like to talk to David. I haven't had a chance
Well,
to yet.
well, we wanted to have you. You're welcome. You actually, I wanted to do it today with you on the show. So you're welcome if you're free
When
Friday
he talks
morning.
about stuff I talk about, he's one of the few people who talks about
Yeah.
militias like I do.
Yeah. If you're going to be around on Friday morning, you're welcome to join us for that.
Yeah.
So even if it's just a part of it. So anyway.
Okay, now.
So we only have about a half an hour. Sorry guys, this
Yeah.
is we only have about a half an hour to go through.
Yeah, well, and sometimes that happens. That's fine. Now last week, only because my big fat fingers forgot to mark in my pocket constitution when we left off. We did just the preamble, and that was it, right?
We kind of went into a little bit. No, yeah, we did the preamble, but we didn't really go into any part of any article.
Okay, that's what I was remembering. And one of the things I have noticed is as the older I get, the less I remember. So I'm happy to know that my memory served me well on that. All right, so and I want to just do a quick brush on the preamble here. Reminder that the preamble is an introduction. It's not technically legally binding. It's just like you go to the doctor, you fill out a form, I, patient's name, authorize my doctor to do such and such. It's kind of the opening paperwork in a sense, but the preamble was written after the Constitution was written. Now also understand that the Constitution was written in committees, and the preamble committee was led by a guy named Governor Morris. And so it's very important part of the Constitution. It sets up the whole thing. But what sets up the entire system is Article 1, Section 1, which is what we're getting ready to talk about. And we can talk about it in about half an hour. Because, and I'm sure those of you who have been involved long enough, you recognize the term separation of powers. A separation of powers basically means that in our system, only the legislative branch has legislative powers, only the executive branch has executive powers, and only the judicial branch has judicial powers. They're not supposed to mix their powers. They are exclusionary when it comes to each of they exclusively, in other words, have the powers they have. The idea of separation of powers is attributed to a gentleman by the name of Montesquieu. Montesquieu is a French writer who loved the British system. The colonies loved Montesquieu's writings, and he, in his writings, The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu explains the importance of a separation of powers. You look back in history, or even at the time way government was, they didn't have a separation of powers. For example, in the British Parliament, the executive, which is the prime minister, once they got rid of the monarchy, that is, now today, the executive, the prime minister is also the highest ranking legislator. There's no separation of power. The executive and the legislative branches are kind of mixed there. In the old Roman Republic, in the Senate, the Senate had two consuls, which were the executive branch, and then a number of judges, which was their judicial branch. I can't remember the names of the judges, starts with a P off the top of my head, but regardless, so separation of powers is a key here. Separation of powers, however, goes back even further than Montesquieu. There was a guy named Polybius, Polybius, Polybius. He was a Greek political philosopher who was actually captured by the Romans at one point. And he loved the Roman Republic, but it was too late to save it. It was headed for empire. But they did kind of lean on him a little bit for some of the Greek governmental political ideas. And Polybius said that the lawgivers should not be the lawmakers, and lawmakers should not be the lawgivers. So, in other words, those who execute the law must not be the ones that are establishing the law. They must be separate, separation of powers. So, in the first 3 articles, the very beginning of each of them, the idea of separation of powers is established, and I'll get into that in a minute. It doesn't say separation of powers, but the idea is established in each of those first sentences of each of the first 3 articles. So let's go over Article 1, Section 1, and I'll point it out as we go through it. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The Senate is mentioned first because it is the upper house. The House of Representatives was considered the lower house. All legislative powers, let's break that down. The word all, and when I tell my classes this, people chuckle, but I'm dead serious here. It's important to understand that the word all means all. And I kind of joke usually, well, shocking, all means all, because you know how the politicians are. They'll make a word mean whatever they want. The word all means all here. Legislative powers. Legislative powers are the ability to 1, create law, or 2, modify law, or 3, strike down or repeal law. Legislative powers. Create law, modify law, repeal law. Those are legislative powers. The executive does not have a job. He cannot execute law until it's been created. He cannot change his execution unless it's been modified. He does not eliminate his execution unless it's been repealed. And that all begins with the Congress, the legislature. The courts cannot adjudicate law unless it exists. So the whole system begins with your legislators. Without the legislative process, there is no law. Without law, there is no government. And they're supposed to, and this is where I feel like putting quotation marks around the word supposed to, or supposed. They're supposed to follow the rule of law. In other words, and their authorities. Our problem is they don't. This is why this is important, though. What I'm teaching you is the way it's supposed to be. I'm teaching you how the car in your driveway that's not running is supposed to run. We've got to fix it. We know it's not operating properly. So I'm going to point out what's wrong so that we know what we need to correct. And it's not going to be an overnight fix. Nothing happens instantaneously. This is going to take time. And all of this also is important, but of course, none of it matters if we don't get right with God in the first place. We're not a virtuous society. All of this is out the door anyway. But so let's understand, first of all, that the legislative powers, all legislative powers belong to Congress. All legislative powers herein this Constitution, herein, granted, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Granted is an interesting word. We know what granted means. If something is granted, you have been given something, and if that's happened, then there's a grantor and there's a grantee. Someone is granting it. Someone had it before Congress received it. So these legislative powers, these federal legislative powers, are being granted to Congress by the entity that held all of those powers prior to this granting. The entities that held all those powers prior to this granting are the states. Most people want to say, well, we the people. Well, yes, but no. We are definitely the most important component in this whole process. Citizen is the most important political office in the country. It is our job as citizens.
Sound like Robert Heinlein.
Very good. I will take that as a compliment.
I knew you would.
So as a citizen, you are, well, of course, you're thinking Stormship Troopers, but
yeah.
But,
if anybody who doesn't know Robert Heinlein, he wrote the book Starship Troopers, which was turned into some cheesy, freaking lame, teeny bot movie, but it was actually, the book was actually very seriously done.
And it was very well done. Stranger in a Strange Land also kind of ties into this concept a little bit too. And that's probably my favorite of all his books, is Stranger in a Strange
And
Land.
I will say is I do believe Starship Troopers is Heinlein is mandatory reading at the military academy. At
No
the military
kidding.
academies, yeah, I believe so.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
think yeah.
anyway, so being a citizen, that is the most important political office in the country, because it's up to us to make sure that these entities that hold this power are operating the way they're supposed to, and they're not operating outside the parameters or authorities that have been given to them. And there's checks and balance all throughout the system. All right. Now, that said, getting back to this granting. So the states are the grantors. They had all the powers prior to any being given to the federal government. They're the ones that wrote this Constitution through their delegates. So the states are the parents. The federal government is not a party to the contract known as the Constitution. It is a creation. The federal government didn't come first, the states did. Matter of fact, there's a great Reagan quote, and I just so happen to have it on my desk, so it's kind of funny. It ties into it. Ronald Reagan. It is my intention to curb the size and influence of the federal establishment and to demand recognition of the distinction between the powers granted to the federal government and those reserved to the states or to the people. All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states created the federal government. Reagan may have been a few things on a few levels, but he was right there.
Yes, he was.
So let's understand that the grantors, here are the states. States are the parents. So if you're a parent, what do you want to do? You want to make sure you have oversight over your child. You want to make sure you got a little bit of control there. So as we go through the Constitution, one of the things that we will establish is that originally there was nothing the federal government could do without the states directly or indirectly approving of it. The states had oversight over everything the federal government did. What a wonderful world that would be if we got back to it. That's what a republic is. That's one of the differences between a democracy and a republic. In a democracy, everything that a government does is voted in by the people. But in a republic, there are checks and balances. And while the people do vote directly or indirectly for all of these mechanisms are designed in such a way to distribute the power so that all the power isn't in one place. So, for example, in the legislative process, these two houses that we're getting ready to talk about, Senate, the members of the U.S. Senate were appointed by the state legislatures. They looked at the whole legislative process different than the members of the House, who were, as today, voted in directly by the people. Two heads are better than one. Those heads need to be different so that you have different views, so that there is something called debate. Debate is a wonderful thing. Debate is what keeps liberty alive. That's the reason why you hear from certain political groups out there, oh, well, do nothing Congress. No, I want them to debate. I want things to take time. I want things to move slowly. That is what keeps liberty alive. There is such thing as a efficient, quick government. It's called a dictatorship. It's like Star Trek, right? Jean-Luc Picard, make it so, and it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're shooting for here. We want the two houses to be different from each other, and we want to check on them. When I say check, I mean check and balance by the states, by the people, by other institutions. Not just for them to run freely and do what they want. And even the mechanisms of even passing legislation. Congress, while they do establish, create law, modify law, repeal law, unless they have a 2/3 majority that can overwhelm a veto, it doesn't become law until the president signs it. Another check. You've got the voice of the people in the House, you got the voice of the states in the Senate, and then you've got the voice of the federal government through the president. And we got three things involved in creating this. Now, once again, if the president doesn't like it, but he's full of bullpucky, then with 2/3 vote from each house, Congress can override such a veto. but that means it better be pretty darn good. So you've got all these mechanisms in place to protect us from pure democracy and from tyranny. Because we don't want to be too far to big government, but we don't want to be too far towards democracy or no government. We have to have that happy medium. We have to have that mixed constitution, that blending of the system, so that things run in such a manner that there's always a debate, there's always a challenge, there's always, well, let's make sure, let's go through this process. They don't just, for example, appoint judges. The president nominates them, still has to go through confirmation hearing. The president can't just go out there and agree to a treaty, not constitutionally anyway.
Right.
It requires the Senate to ratify it. There's always a second step. All right, so all legislative powers herein granted, grantors of the states, grantees of Congress, shall. Shall is an interesting word. It appears a number of times in the Constitution. It also appears a number of times in the Ten Commandments. The word shall means it's mandatory. Whenever you see shall, it's not a recommendation, it's not a suggestion, it is mandatory. Every time. All legislative powers herein granted shall, it's mandatory, be vested in the Congress of the United States. Vested. That's our word here for the separation of powers I was talking about earlier. The word vested, if you look it up, ties into two things. One, it means granted. To grant is to vest. However, the word vested also has two other words attached to it that in its meaning. One, exclusionary, and two, irrevocable. So if something is vested, it is granted, and then it is exclusionary. In other words, only that part of government has that power. So if these powers are vested in Congress, only Congress has legislative powers.
It's Doug, real quick, one of the Holding Down Dixie asked to look up the definition of citizen in Black's law. So, yes, no?
Is that it on Black's law?
Right here.
Let me say this real quick. Black's law is a important resource, but it is not definitive in all cases of things, because what the founding fathers are going through when it came to their definitions. You also want to look at Vattel's Law of Nations, and later on you also want to look at the 1828 Webster's Dictionary by Noah Webster, which was written to help clarify the definitions that are in the Constitution. That said, the word citizen and comes from city, C-I-T-I, comes from city. Originally, it was cities had citizens. Of course, the word evolved to mean bigger than just members of cities. So now, that said, my little input, what it says is a member of a free city or rural society possessing all the rights and privileges, which that goes back to Article 4, privileges and immunities. In Article 4 of the Constitution says the same thing, which can be enjoyed by any person under its constitution and government and subject to the corresponding duties. Citizens are members of community inspired to common goal who, in associated relations, submit themselves to rules of conduct. The word submit is not necessarily accurate in the founding fathers' position. That would be a subject. Because the founders added something which they discussed the Declaration of Independence, which is consent to the governed. In other words, they're not submitting themselves to rules; they're establishing the rules of conduct through consent of the governed.
There's a good teaching opportunity, Doug, because and Holding Down Dixie. Well, listen, this is not picking on you, okay? Not at all. But Holding Down Dixie says, well, it's kind of important in court. And while that may very well be true in the system that we have now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're applying Black's law is applying constitutional principles. It's almost in a way subverting constitutional principles and making it what the lawyers wanted to say. And that
Right.
goes back. That goes back to what Doug was talking about at the beginning. In relationship with you know, lawyers are translating and they are saying it. So Black's law may be important in today's modern court, but that doesn't necessarily mean. And for contrast, let me do this here just because I want to
Well,
do this.
understand also Black's Law Dictionary was written, the original draft of that, or the original copy of that, was written more than 100 years after the Constitution. So that's like saying, well, today's dictionary says, so the Constitution means this. Well, it's a dictionary or a resource that's written long after.
Yeah. So
So
citizen
language does.
citizen in the 1828 Webster's dictionary is the native of a city or an inhabitant who enjoys the freedom and privileges of the city in which he resides. The freedom of a city
As
distinguished
distinguished from a
from a
foreigner, right?
foreigner. A townsman, man of a trade, not a gentleman, inhabitant, a dweller in any city, town, or place. In general sense, a native or permanent resident in a city or country, as the citizens of London or Philadelphia, or the citizens of the United States. In the United States, a person native or naturalized who has the privilege of exercising the elective franchise of the qualifications which enable him to vote for rulers and to purchase and hold real estate.
Yeah,
If
so it's citizen is a member of or a resident of, and because they are a part of, then they are entitled to the privileges and immunities of. And that goes back to what I was talking about with we the people last week. I said we the people of the United States, instead rather than we the people in the United States in the preamble. We the
right,
people of the United States. They are, we the people of. We are part of the system, and that gives us an entitlement to the privileges and immunities. And then also you got to remember back then, long over 100 years before Black's law, is the fact that in Europe, citizen was gone. There were no citizens for the most part. The word was used every once in a while, but for the most part, you were either a member of the ruling class or among the privileged that were associated with that ruling class, nobles, barons, things like that, or you were a subject, a peasant, a serf, subject. The idea of the average person being a citizen was gone. The United States resurrected the term citizen.
I think, and holding down Dixie. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think what you're saying is in part five here. You're saying in the United States, a person native or naturalized who has the privilege of exercising the elective franchise with the qualifications which enable him to vote for rulers and to purchase and hold real estate. Am I understanding you correctly when you're saying that that is privileges and not rights? Are you is that what you're I don't have the
Well,
I
governments don't give rights. God gives
I
rights. So,
understand that.
so
I understand that, and I'm in the most respectful way. I'm trying to understand what they're saying if they're saying that they're use that as the privilege and not the right, and I'm just trying to understand because anyway, I'm just trying to understand. Please, if I'm let me know if I'm barking up the right tree there because I want to understand what you're trying to say. Because if I understand what holding down Dixie's trying to say is that that we have privileges and some of things that we have are privileges and not rights.
well,
Whereas
actually, this ties into, yeah, that's sort of, I think, what Holding Down Dixie's trying to say. Goes a little deeper than that. I've dealt with folks that present Black's Law to me often. It's part of the reason why I kind of knew how to respond in the sense of when it was written and all that, too. Um, but we have to make sure we understand the definition of rights before we try to play word salad a little bit with it, because our rights, what I'm being told by some folks is because of the way the system has been established, if you're a citizen, you have no rights because you're under the rule of, you have to follow, you're subject to. So you really don't have your rights. They give you privileges. That's the way it's established. In order to have rights, you have to be outside the system so that you can practice your rights. That
Okay.
is pretty much the argument. And that's not necessarily so, because privileges, immunities, and rights are not being defined properly. A privilege is something that is you are entitled to, but it has a list of requirements that you must accomplish, or something you must meet in order to have it. For example, if you have a driver's license, you can have a driver's license taken away because it's a privilege. It's not a right, and therefore you have to pass a test in order to get that, have that privilege afforded to you. If you get too many tickets, you can have that privilege taken away. Okay. When it comes to a right, that's not something that's given you by God, so it's not supposed to be taken away. It's not a privilege. It's a right. It's different. But the thing is, the problem is the way privileges and rights are being defined, it kind of blurs the lines there. For example, if you read Bushrod Washington, which was the nephew of George Washington, he actually wrote a pamphlet that discussed the difference between rights and privileges, and he actually listed voting as a privilege. Why? Because it's not a God-given right. It's something that has requirements attached to it. It is a privilege of citizenship. If you're not a citizen, you don't get it. Therefore, it's not a right. It's a privilege of citizenship. If you become a felon, it can be taken away. So it's a privilege, just like a license would be.
According to who?
According to Bushrod Washington.
Okay.
This is the nephew of George Washington.
But where does it say? Where does it say that in the Constitution?
It doesn't. There's an ongoing debate. What's the difference between a right and a privilege? Because in Article 4 and the 14th Amendment, it talks about privileges and immunities. Does that include rights? Are rights a part of that? Are they not? And so it's an ongoing debate. So you got to go back to the writers of the time and just before the time to really establish what rights are. Now, to get back to what I was saying, so now what is a right? A right is not something government dictates. It's not supposed to be something they give to you. It's not something that they're supposed to be influential on at all. But we've been taught it is.
Right. Doug, real quick, I know you're not a fan of this particular pocket constitution. I do like this one because it has at the very beginning, it has a story, and one of them is a tiny little half page of this that I always love. Scourged for not taking a license. The reply given him was that a man being scourged was a minister who refused to take a license. He was one of the 12 who were locked in jail because they refused to take a license. A license often becomes an arbitrary control by government that makes a crime out of what ordinarily would not be a crime. It turns a right into a privilege. 3 days later, they scourged him to death. This was the incident in which sparked Christian attorney Patrick Henry to write the famous words which later became the rallying cry of the revolution. What is that gentleman's wish? What they would have, that life is so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty or give me death.
Yeah, no argument there. And I'm not, and I don't want to be misunderstood here. Okay.
And I'm not. I forgive me, Doug. I'm seeing the chat, and I'm trying to.
No, I got you. No, I actually have it up
trying
too, but
I'm trying to use this as an opportunity because
if we're running out of time rapidly, so I'd like to finish what I was saying.
Finish up. Go ahead.
So when it comes to our rights, you're right. Government shouldn't be licensing our rights. It shouldn't be a privilege if it's a right. So the question is it a right or is it a privilege? Why is getting a driver's license a privilege? Well, we're using roads that everybody's paying for and that everybody's occupying, and that there's other drivers out there. And so in order to maintain an orderly society where we're not running into each other, there's going to be certain rules and laws that are going to be in place that the consent of the governed is a part of. We recognize, for example, the consent of the governed is a stoplight, red stop, yellow is, slow down, is it ready to stop, go red or go through if you're close enough. and green is to go. We have all accepted that as a part of our society, consent to the governed. But also, in order to show that we can abide by those rules, it's the privilege to drive a vehicle on those roads, that actual, driving the vehicle, so that there's an agreement among our society that's being done with someone who knows what they're doing, safe manner, blah blah blah. We have established that they're then driving a vehicle on the roads. It requires a license. That license is a privilege. Now, that said, your rights are not supposed to be treated as privileges. Your rights are rights, and the job of government is to stay out of them. This goes back to, once again, the Declaration of Independence. What does it say? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have a right to be happy, but you have a right to pursue it. And government's job is to get out of the way of your pursuit. So I have a right to an education. That does not mean that the government's supposed to pay for my education. That means they're supposed to get out of the way so I can pursue that education on my own terms without them putting up obstacles in the way of me getting that education. We have a right to health care. No, I don't. I have a right to pursue that health care. In other words, they're not obligated to pay for my health care or give it to me or supply it. No guarantee. Their job, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the word guarantee in that article, it comes down to, I have a right to pursue to happiness, pursue that health care, to work on what I can afford and figuring out where I'm going to go and get what I need for my health care. Governments, based on the fact that it's a right to pursue it, is not supposed to put up obstacles in the way of my pursuing that. So that's what hopefully
okay. So I think what they're talking about is in terms of.
Well, I know what they're talking about,
and I do too, and I'll be honest with you. On some of the things that they're talking about, I tend to lean in their direction. Um, because I mean, why did a license should be something that is required if you are conducting commerce, not if you're just going from point A to point B. Like, what did they do, and what did they, back in the early part of the century, in the last century, they didn't, you didn't need a license to take your wagon
yeah, but
across there.
as things have expanded, as a people, we have decided that commercial licensing is not enough, because
and again, I'm not trying to argue with you, Doug, because I know where you stand on this, but I understand why you say that, but I respectfully disagree, because if you're not conducting commerce, then you shouldn't be doing that. What I view that as is twofold. Number one is the state is exactly turning a right into a privilege, and it is using it to profit and to make money for the state. Because when I look here, California, known for its car culture, started requiring licenses in 1913. Oh, same year that the Federal Reserve came into being.
No, I'm not defending licensing, but at the same time, I recognize that licensing is a necessary evil. So, but they've gone too far with it. When I look at things, usually and we've talked about other issues, and I do not want to get in these discussions right now.
No, we're not going.
For example, there are certain theories where you're either way over here or you're way over there, and usually my response is, the answer is usually somewhere in the middle. That's usually my way of looking at things. And I get into the research, and then I go into a deep dive. So thank you, holding down Dixie. Now I'm going to be doing a whole lot of research, and it's all your fault, but I love you anyway because of it. But
well, and I'll tell you, when I moved to Arizona, I had a California driver's license, and California required me to renew it every 5 years. When I moved to Arizona, and this was pre Real ID Act, I signed up when I got my license when I moved to Arizona in 2011. My license did not expire until I turned 65. So my license didn't expire until 2034.
I actually, right now, I reside in two places. I have a home here in Southern California. I have a home on the Oregon coast. My driver's license is an Oregon driver's license. Mm-hmm. And there's reasons for that. Partly because I'm in the process of moving there, slowly but surely. partly because of other factors, which I'm sure if you're a conservative like me, you probably won't have to think too hard regarding the difference between, I don't know, California laws and Oregon laws. Not that Oregon's too far behind California of late. But it's all, a lot of it's just minutia too. But there is an answer in between. But I don't want to sit here and say, well, that means then that since I'm being licensed and since I'm a citizen, I'm actually a slave. That's not necessarily true, or at least not from the founder's point of view. It may have been turned into that along the way. So the idea, my solution is not to toss it aside; is to get back to what it's supposed to be.
Right, and I'm with you. I'm with you there. Yeah, and I think that, the one thing that Doug and I don't do 100% of is agree, and that's a good thing. We
Yeah,
like that
it's one of the things I love
because
about our friendship, actually.
I don't want somebody that agrees with me all the time, and I will tell you, and I'm gonna leave this teaser for well, I'm just gonna leave this teaser for a future class, but you know, if we are being intellectually honest about recent decisions in the Supreme Court, I think we can all agree that the Supreme Court got it right on Roe v. Wade, because what it did was it sent the right to
With the Dobbs
life
Jackson, yeah,
right down back to the states. Okay, now it didn't and still is not getting it right on the ownership of firearms, and I am the biggest firearms advocate you're going to find, but the federal constitution, it only restricts the federal government. It does not restrict the states. And if it did restrict the states, then you would have verbiage in the state constitutions to talk about the state constitutions. So, if we're being intellectually honest, as conservatives, we love the Roe v. Wade decision because it went our way, and we're loving all of the decisions coming down on the Second Amendment because they're going our way too. But those are being rewarded as the conservative viewpoint, but they're not being rewarded and applied with the same what's the word I'm looking for, Doug? They're not being applied with the same I don't know justification.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, we're out of time. But let me say this real quick. So
Yeah.
I'm watching the chat room and I'm getting a kick out of it. So in California, my truck, had I needed to register it in California, would have been needed to be smogged and would have been over $200 a year. In Oregon, I don't have to smog it, and I get my registration not for 1 year but 2 years for $104. So $52 a year, but I get a 2-year sticker, $104, no smog.
Well, in Arizona, I do it for 5 years with no
really?
smog
Wow.
sticker. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
not
trying to measure body parts, but just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, your vehicle's more of a man. I get it. Okay. All
right, you want to take us home, Doug? Take us home because I got to get on the road and
politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com. My new site launches July 1st, so when you go to those addresses, it'll all look different on after July 1st. Exciting stuff on the horizon. We'll get into that later. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thanks for spending the time with us.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.